Hello, Central Ohio. It's that time of the week. It's Wednesday and it's 3 o'clock. So you know what that means. It is time for a brotherly conversation about health, wealth, and race in Franklin County. Today, I've got two very special guests with me. Two very, very special guests. I've got Lawrence Funderburke and Jim Cleamons. And so I know you'll give me a virtual round of applause for these two great gentlemen who just you should have heard the conversation we had before this. I'm not going to ask you, Coach, that question again because I don't want to put you out there like that. But but nonetheless, we're going to just dive right into it. I'm excited. These are former professional athletes, former big time professional athletes. Now, guys, I got to tell you, I have my own history and success in athletics. I actually ran track in college, and so that I know I'm joking. That's I did run track in college, but I know it is not to the accomplishment that you guys are. But I am a former athlete in many ways. So my son's an athlete in college right now. So
All right.
he's running track in college too right now.
Okay. All
So,
right.
but welcome to the show, guys. Central Ohio is watching, and so we want to have a really good conversation today. So I'm excited. We're going to just dig right into it. For those who don't know, Jim Cleamons has earned 10 NBA championship rings. Now,
Wow.
10 NBA championship. Let me say that again. 10 NBA championship rings. Coach, can I get one of those? Can I have one?
No, you can't. You
Well,
got
I
to.
tried. Hey, look, if you don't ask, you don't get. So hey,
Well,
but he has coached the Chicago Bulls, the Los Angeles Lakers, the New Orleans Hornets, the Dallas Mavericks, and the Milwaukee Bucks. He teaches camps, advises coaches, and conducts basketball workshops in Africa for the Junior NBA. A member of the 1972 NBA championship Lakers squad that won a league record 33 straight games, a record that has yet to be broken. Yet to be broken. And that's saying a lot. The Ohio Basketball Hall of Famer and Buckeye basketball scholar, athlete, and standout was also a head coach at Youngstown State. Welcome, Coach Cleamons.
thank you very much.
My good friend, Lawrence Funderburke, who, he's my age peer. And so I grew up watching Lawrence, and man, he was a monster. I mean, an absolute monster on the course, a man ahead of his time, but a good friend to this day. We also know him as Mr. Fundy, a three-time All Big Ten performer and magna cum laude graduate in business finance at Ohio State. He played professional basketball for 11 years, an accomplished author of several books and a highly sought public speaker on a variety of topics. I've seen him speak at several conferences. He's amazing and outstanding, and a successful entrepreneur with Fundermax Fitness. It's all good cookies and the Lawrence Funderburke Youth Organization. Glad to have you, my friend. It's so good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So let's dig right in, guys. 2020 has been that year. We started off with a a global pandemic that led to the shutdown of our economy and in many ways our lifestyles, just going to the gym every day or going to the grocery store or to the park or whatever it is you do abruptly stopped. And we spent the better part of the last few months hunkered in our homes away from each other, but most importantly, trying to avoid the spread of a virus. And then on top of that, there was the tragedy of the George Floyd murder that set off, I think, a level of unrest across the country that we've not seen in our lifetimes. Perhaps, Jim, you may have a little bit of a different perspective on that, but I know for most of us, we've not seen this type of unrest across the board. Lawrence, you're my age, and I remember, I think the first sort of caught on video uh, was Rodney King,
Rodney King.
back in the early '90s, and for a moment you had the country's attention about law enforcement and black men and abusive power, and there was riots and there was different things, but the change came and went, you know, and so and then here we are now at this point in the year where, we had the second wave of the pandemic, if you will, and we're kind of quasi shut down and quasi going, you're seeing seasons canceled and schools closed and businesses shut down still. And we really don't have an end in sight as of yet. There's no vaccine. There's no, date to when the economy will fully open back up. And quite frankly, as the finance professional I'm in, as you guys both know, too, in the world of finance, is there's a lag, so what happened in May in the economy will really hit us right about now, because of the lag of when we collect taxes, when you spend, and all those things. And so, how are I ask every guest this question: how are you feeling right now? What's, if there was one word to sort of capture just how you feel right now? I mean, I've heard everything from anxious to exhausted to tired to frustrated to mad to hopeful to excited. Everyone's had one word that really sort of sums up how you just personally feeling as a Black man in America. What's your one word? Let's start with you, Coach.
Wow. Yes. One word is pretty difficult. I mean, I don't have a prepared speech, but one word is tough. I mean, because once again, as you elaborated on what's been happening actually since about March, late February, early March, um, there's no normal anymore. Everything is a new normal, and all this awareness that we need to be about ourselves. There's a lot of selfishness going on, which I can't understand because when I got back, I was coming back from Australia when this thing broke out. And then the state of Ohio was running all these ads, so all about us, all about us. And then when you ask us to wear a mask, all these people had different reasons for not accommodating the public health. We got very selfish. And wherever people start worrying about themselves, rather than worrying about the public health issues that would have slowed this virus down, it became me, my rights, my this, my that. Well, wait a minute, we about us or we about the individual rights? So it's really confusing as to what the mindset of the people, a lot of them my age, unfortunately, and the young group who want their independence, and they're off doing their thing because they think they're losing some of their civil liberties. So I think we got a couple of different camps going on here, and and I think some Americans are showing their real agenda, if you will.
Yeah, man.
And unfortunately, a lot of people that look like your guests and me, what people that we represent, it's lost in translation. So I think America's at the kind of crossroads. I think this election coming up is going to be a referendum of which direction this country is going to move. And hopefully we're smart enough and intuitive enough to make the right decisions when we go into the voting box. And we vote our conscience and what's right for most Americans, because we got to move forward. Otherwise, we're stuck in quicksand, bro, to be honest with you.
I think you hit the nail on the head, man. Tough. I love that word because, it really captures, I mean, you talk about, the different sides of the conversation, people who didn't want to wear a mask and, the mask is about protecting others in case that you are asymptomatic. And so it's amazing how the simplicity of that becomes a divisive issue. It's a damn mask, I mean, it's a damn mask, and it is not the end of the world. And I don't know if you've ever watched those YouTube illustrations of intubation, that if you get sick and to the degree that it becomes a real health situation for you and they have to put the tubing down your throat and how that works. I mean, I think I'd rather have the mask than to have that go through that experience. But Fundy, what do you think? I mean, how are you feeling, man? You've had, I mean, both of you have had just tremendous careers and you've seen a lot. But this got to be a unique time for you too. And how are you feeling, man? You feeling, positive, negative? What's your one word?
Coach, he talked about it. It's not necessarily my word, but he said confusing. And I think when you work with young people, they're confused, right? This is, like Coach said, new normal. It's something they've never experienced before. and they're confused, particularly kids who have been out of school 6 months. Our kids have been out of school for 6 months. They've lost momentum. So how are we going to help them get it back, right? And that's something that I'm adamant about doing. The word that comes to mind for me with that is hopeful. There's never been a time when African Americans, the spotlight is on us. The spotlight is on us. Whether right or wrong, it's on us. And then now this is a time when we can really leverage this moment. Like you said, Rodney King, civil rights movements, obviously those were leverageable moments. But how do we move the ball forward collectively? And I think that's kind of where we are. And it's going to really be a defining moment to see how we respond. I think when you're going to ask about the protests, and I always say, look, if you have a protest, peaceful protest, you have passion, but there has to be some purpose behind it. What's your mission? What's your intent? What are the goals? What are the objectives? And then from there, you have to have some productivity, right? If you don't have a purpose, you don't have a productivity. And if you have productivity, you don't have a payoff. So I think for us, we need to really have a playbook. I mean, Coach Cleamons, the playbook that he's used and been a part of, I mean, it's a winning playbook, right? So where's our playbook as a people? I think our ancestors yearn for this day when we would actually, our voice will be finally heard. Now, what are we going to do at the moment? The spotlight is on us. That's why I'm hopeful, because I think if we can leverage it and really show that our value proposition is more than just the color of our skin, right? We have substance behind us. This will be a great moment, and then our legacy will never be the same. I'm focused on legacies, because if you transform a legacy, you automatically change your life. And I think that's where we need to be as a people.
Man, I mean, the word hopeful is such an encouraging and optimistic lens, and I agree with it as well. That when you think of a people, the African American race, who came to this country in bondage and as slaves, our ancestors. That's like starting a race. My son runs track in college. He runs the 400-meter dash. It's like giving somebody a 300-meter head start and expecting them to, catch up to the guy that had the 300-meter start. It's just, once you kind of start off that way, it's very difficult. And so if that's an unfair advantage, you have to eliminate the unfair advantage and have them start at the same point. And because the race has already started, it's very difficult to do. That being said, we talked about the unrest in across America, and even here in Franklin County. This unrest, though, transfers into now you have athletes who are taking a stance. And quite frankly, I think it was, Colin Kaepernick was just a little bit ahead of his time, quite frankly. But I think Colin Kaepernick really set in motion what we have today, and that's demonstration in a peaceful way of a country that is great, but has gotten a lot of things wrong. And so what do you think about these athletes that have stepped up? Recently you saw the NBA players who they say, we're not playing, and I think made a tremendous statement. Tell me about what's going on in the mindset of athletes, coaches, owners, when that kind of thing happens. What do you think they're thinking, and how are they talking behind the scenes when that first kind of surfaced and athletes made the decision to do that? Why don't we start with you, Lawrence, and then we'll go to Coach next time. We'll switch it around a little bit.
You're right. It's a very good question. And what do we actually do? And I think for today's athletes, here's what I have to say in terms of that. When you're an African American athlete, particularly at a professional level, you have a revered position in society. In many ways, you're treated better than mainstream society just because of your position in terms of, preferred seating at restaurants and different events and discounts that you don't necessarily need, but obviously you're still giving them. So there's a lot, and I think as an African American, there's a dichotomy. You're torn between the way you're treated and then the way most African Americans are treated, which is totally different. And I think for today's athletes, they have to find a way to say, how do I become a bridge builder, right? That's something that we focus on. How do I become a bridge builder to help our people advance and particularly give them the opportunities? Not everybody's going to play pro. I mean, with me and Mr. Cleamons, we were very fortunate to play professional, but how many guys who actually are very talented, maybe some more talented maybe than us, but didn't make it to the professional level? So it's not always about skill. There's a lot of other things that need to go on. So I think there has to be a cohesive game plan, playbook. And I think for athletes today, it's not just about throwing money at a problem, right? It's about you need to invest your time. I mean, one of the things that we know is the lack of positive male role models in our community, African Americans. So we have to step forward. And I tell people, I have my own family. They're first, but also I have kids who are not biologically connected to me that I'm responsible for, right? That is how a village comes together, right? It takes a village to raise a child, but we've lost that way, and particularly, and Coach hit it on the head, and really through selfishness. Everybody has gone after their own, and they've forgotten that there are so many people who are left behind that we need to go back and get them as well.
Let me ask you this though. Let me ask this
though. That's kind of what I have to say in terms of my assessment.
Do you think behind the scenes the owners support that, or you think they're in a forced mode to support the conversation? Because what we're seeing a lot of, or we're seeing a lot of support from the white community in this time, and that's what makes this also unique. This timing also unique. So I'm just curious. You think that owners are saying, what can we do? How can we make this right? How can we be better, at this? And do you think there's a real serious conversation going on, or do you think that the players' refusal to play just gets the public's attention and it's just more of an outward position?
I think the owners, the onus is on them in some regards, because as I say, in terms of the structure and in terms of there's been a big push for diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? In terms of that. And a lot of companies, organizations have applauded themselves on the back in terms of that, but they miss one critical part, the cultural competency part, right? And being able to relate. And really the protests in many ways, really voices that haven't been heard, people who felt left behind. And I think owners have to say, you know what, I can't just worry about my players and particularly the assets that are actually on the court. What about those geniuses that are trapped in poverty, they're stuck in poverty? What are we going to do to help them? And I think for owners, a lot of them, they have to do more in terms of the community engagement and outreach, because the players are just one circle. But if you go outside of that, there's a whole bunch of other people who need assistance and who need help, right?
Yeah.
And then how do you empower them in a way? Not just give a handout, but how do you give them a helping hand and move the ball forward in their life? And then not only their life, but their legacy as well. So I think the owners can do more from a community engagement perspective. They can do more from a cultural competency perspective, right? And I think if you can start with those two in mind, right, you can have it, because oftentimes, particularly white men in leadership positions, a lot of times you defer to someone else. No. You're gonna get your hands dirty. You're gonna be part of the solution, and you're not just gonna give the buck to someone else in order to take care of the responsibility. So I think there has to be some accountability in terms of those two areas. And I think if you can build the cultural competency, you can build cultural capital. And I think there's no cultural capital, because it's like, okay, you give these athletes a job, you give them the money, but no, there's more than you need to do that, because think about where these kids come from. Think about where they come. Look at how I came from. Coach Cleamons, we didn't grow up with a silver spoon in our mouth. So what can we do to help all boats, not just those who are actually on the waters with us, so to speak?
Yeah, man. Before we go to you, Coach Cleamons, I want to give a quick shout out to Gene Harris, former Columbus City School Superintendent. Thank you, Gene. Gene's been watching us every week. I appreciate your support, and I appreciate you being engaged. Sana Barrett, good to see you, my friend. Kevin Lloyd, Jonathan Bentley, Keena McDonald-Smith, our Deputy Administrator, Marvin West, thank you for joining us. Ariel Sal, thanks for joining us, Ariel, my niece. Robin Renee Walton, my auntie. Hey, auntie, how are you doing? Thanks for joining us. And author Brenda K. Thomas, thank you so much for joining us. Coach, so this conversation around taking a position in the role of the athlete, the role of these organizations, whether it was the Mavericks, the Hornets, or the Chicago Bulls, what's happening in an internal conversation when these athletes step up and say, you know what, we ain't playing. We sitting down right now. What's going on? And is this the right role for athletes to play in the conversation around law enforcement and the tension in the Black community and all the other issues that are part of the mainstream public today?
Well, I wish I had been a fly on the wall to hear some of those conversations. And to answer one part of the questions, it's absolutely right for them to take a stand. When I was growing up years ago, people talk about civil rights. We're not talking about civil rights. We're talking about human rights. You cut to the chase. There's nothing incorrect, nothing to be apologetic about what's happening in this country. See, the line has been drawn, and when the line has been drawn and history is written, I want to be on the right side of history. See, all too often, the United States gets caught with its hand in the cookie jar. And you damn right, some of these owners, they're trying to, how can we get out of this with spending the least amount of money? Well, see, money gets you in trouble if you don't use it the right way. See, they think throwing money at issues, it's basically just lip service. They're just trying to, soothe the savage beast, and we'll deal with that later. Where the truth be told, these are issues that have been around since we were slaves, since some of us got our freedom, and we're talking about human rights. My grandfather on my mother's side was born in 1864. The Civil War was over in 1868. So he was born into slavery. So you got to look at America and say, and guys getting shot, going or walking away. And yeah, over on the east side, when I was a kid, guys were robbing, breaking their homes, and for TVs and tape recorders and all that stuff, and they run away from the police, getting shot in the back. Mm-hmm. This isn't anything new. So when is enough enough? And if the athletes and black athletes and the white people want to join us in a cause, it's a noble cause. But we need more than just the athletes. We need our community to speak up in one voice. Mm-hmm. And that voice has to be heard throughout America. From sea to shining sea, from Canada to Mexico, right? And in America, I realized, right, they have not treated us right. And when I say us, I'm talking about people of color. I'm talking about poor people who are white in Appalachia, right? All you got to do is treat people with some dignity, to give them some dignity, and value themselves as people that, right, yeah, they may not be making as much money as you, but when it comes to money, who cares about money? How you treat me as a person? Just don't throw me a crumb like I'm your pet and say, yeah, that's enough for you. And that's why far too long, and as Black Americans and on the male side, we thought sports and athletics was made some of us thought we were better than what we were. No, man, at the end of the day, we go home. Where do we go home to? Our homes look different than theirs. Our values are different than theirs. And so it's about time we had to talk and just put the cards on the table and say, this is for real. Right. This is it. I want to be treated as an equal American. I don't want to have, I remember I grew up in a 3-family home. I had a mother, an auntie, and an uncle. Mm-hmm. And when I got my driver's license, right, yeah, you had to talk. Yeah, don't be out late. Columbus had a curfew. I had to be home at 11 o'clock. Because I didn't want no cops stopping me, asking me where I've been. Boom. I had 2 hands on the steering wheel. Don't let them stop you. Mm-hmm. You get pulled over for no reasons. It's in time immemorial. So it's right. It says liberty and justice for all. Now, who's your all? That's the question. Who's your all?
I'm gonna do a show just with that name. Like, who's your all? What is when you say life and liberty for all? Who are you talking about? Because that's not being shared, and so you're spot on. And I just want to go a step further because you said something that really intrigued a sort of part B to the question. I don't know about you guys, but I have had a number of my white friends who I believe sincerely reached out to me to say, what can I do? What can I personally do at this moment? And for me, when I'm asked that, I say, you know what, as an elected official, we have a lot of powers and authorities to do things. But you can't legislate morality. At the end of the day, change starts with you. I'm talking to the person who's asking me this. Change starts with you. It starts with you expanding your friendship palette. It starts with you, being more diverse in your own cultural experiences. Fundy, he mentioned, cultural competency. It starts with you understanding the cultural competency of the people you live in, their culture, and that should be embedded into our law enforcement. But have you guys had some of your white friends call you and say, "What can I do?" And if you did, what did you tell them? What did you say to them?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I have, and particularly several friends of mine, white males in leadership positions.
Mm-hmm.
They said, I don't know what to say because I don't want to come across as being cold or callous, and I certainly don't want to come across as being an out of touch racist.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of them said, you know what, I plead the fifth. I'm not going to say anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's the issue, and Coach talked about it. You have to be, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. You have to be invested in this, right? And then it's I always say that it's very difficult because a lot of white males in positions, have a bullseye on their back in terms of leadership position, in terms of the structure, the hierarchy, the good old boy network, all of that stuff. Okay. But you still have to step forward and you still have to do your part. And when it comes to the cultural competency part, listen, I say this, that we have had to learn mainstream history before and almost to the expense and detriment of our own history as a people. You were forced to learn it in school, right? And then you have people, and then I had some friends, it's like June 10th. What is June 10th? Like they never even heard of June 10th before. I mean, it's like, but so we don't want to necessarily be a charity case. We want you to say, you know what, this is the right thing to do at the right time for the right reasons. And this is how we're going to be judged when it comes to history. So Coach talked about that, being on the right side of history. You're on the right side of history when you know that you can do something and you stand by and not do anything. And the reason why I say that is I had a teacher, and his name was Mr. G, fifth grade teacher, right? We were bused from the Bottoms area of Sullivan Gardens all the way up to the Hilltop area of Westgate Elementary School. And I had this teacher.
For those of you who are not from Columbus, the Bottoms is, for those of people who are not from Columbus, they may not know the Bottoms. The Bottoms is what you know today as Franklinton.
Franklinton area, exactly.
It is where Columbus, Central Ohio, actually started. And it was an impoverished area for a long time, and so it's it's the bottom of the hill, but it's also was the references bottom. So I'm sorry, those non-Columbus folks. I just
you're exactly right. Yeah, the Bottoms. Yeah, and really, when you think about that, when they were busing and particularly going to supposedly better schools to give inner city kids, particularly poor Black kids, an opportunity to get better education. So he didn't like us coming to his territory, right? And he was almost out in terms of transitioning school, right? And he had this chart that he had. It was a merit-based chart based on what he thought what were appropriate behaviors or inappropriate behaviors. Mm-hmm. So on the right side was good, better, and best. On the left side was on the way, almost there. And then the last one was what? Jail. So think about, I know, I see this. Let me, because it's going to tie into what I'm talking about in terms of cultural competency. So he had this chart, right? And then there's someone that we know that was in my class with me, Michael Powell. You know Mike Powell, went to Eastside School.
Yeah,
okay.
Mike P.
So,
Absolutely.
and he said, Fundy, how do you remember this stuff? And I said, listen, this is always embedded because if you think about it, don't you know that most of the Black students were always on the wrong side of that chart, on the wrong side of history? And not only that, did we got our hands hit with rulers. We also got paddled. This was when paddling was back in the day. And of course, we disproportionately were paddled more. And then what was really, 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 really damaging is that he would make us stand in the corner with our hands up and feet spread apart, almost to say, we're just going to get you ready because more than likely, look, you see you're in jail now. Now let's get you into a literal jail down the road. Okay. Psychologically, in terms of this, yes, Mr. G was an outlier in terms of my experiences with teachers, but still think about how all of the young men and women that he really, and particularly African-Americans, that he actually destroyed. He was a teacher for a long time. The bad thing is, I'm wrapping up here, is that there were administrators and teachers who knew his plot, knew what he was doing. They chose to do nothing and they did not intervene on our behalf. So you're almost as guilty as the person who's doing it. And that's why I say, when good men and women stand by and do nothing, you're almost as guilty as those who is causing the problem.
So Coach, I think Fundy hit on a couple of points I want to add to, but I want to start with the premise of, have you had any of your white friends call you and say, what can I do? How I'm feeling, or, what's it been like for you? Let's start there.
I haven't had any of my white friends call me.
Wow. Okay. Well,
maybe
let's say if they did, what would you say to them?
Well, once again, see, I was born in North Carolina. All right. And we We came to, check this out now. We came to Columbus, Ohio. We moved from North Carolina, Lincoln, North Carolina, to Columbus, Ohio, September the 6th, 1957. The purpose that we moved was because my auntie, my mother, and my uncle wanted to give my sisters, I'm the middle child between two sisters, a chance at a better life. We knew how the white folks felt about us in North Carolina. So they were going to move us to Columbus to give us better opportunities because they didn't want us saying, yes, sir, no, ma'am, and taking care of white people's children, and that would be our life and our legacy. They saw something better for us. They wanted something better for us. And thank God for their vision. My older sister was an attorney here in town. My baby sister was a college professor, and she speaks Spanish better than I try to talk English. So their dream, they saw a dream, and we fulfilled it. But the part is though, it's in their heart. See, the same people that we were running from in North Carolina, they were still present here in Columbus, Ohio. They just mask it differently. See, once again, it is the content of your heart, how you feel about people. It's not the color of your skin, how you feel about people. And are you pitting people against each other so you can move up the ladder on their backs? You know, are you honest? Or you walking around in a disguise and you go home, you Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. You gotta
real talk right there.
You gotta care about people, man. Not people color their skin. I mean, everybody's down south. You have a poor patch or a bad time. You know, we all go through bad times, but the character of the bad times helps build the people of the good times because you don't. You know, and then people down south, they forever taking a little this over there, so falling hard times. They come together. See, black folks historically keep coming together and lifting up each other. Because we already know we divided. They divide us with the field people working in the fields and people working in the mansion when we were slaves. They did the division. That's why some of us don't trust each other to this day. You can't trust so and so. He tells everything he knows. I mean,
you're really talking now. Now you're really talking.
So this is the way it is.
Those are facts. That's facts. You know, and I only interject because I think you raise a whole that could be a show in itself, and that is how much of the cultural experience from times of slavery still exists in the black culture, in the broader culture today. And I think there are a lot of correlations that just culturally have transferred from one generation to the other, from diet and how we eat to how we enjoy ourselves, entertain ourselves, and how we live in terms of material things. All of those things I think are embedded in how our ancestors arrived and lived on this country for hundreds of years, literally. And the other part about that, Coach, that you made me think of is that Black people, African-American people, have been out of slavery less years than we were in slavery in this country. So we have not, it's still evolving. We're still evolving in terms of the things that carry over from one generation to the next. And I think very much some of the things that you talk about slavery, some of those things are very much still in our culture today. It's why we're at each other's throats in so many ways, and they're still doing it. You were seeing, and this brings up another question. In many ways, this has been the year of the Black woman. You've seen states in Georgia and others where you see Black women running for governor, running for U.S. Senate, and now Kamala Harris. You've got the first Black. She's not African American, but she's Black. I think that's how everybody's classifying her. First Black woman to be a vice presidential candidate on a major ticket. And I think there's a lot of growth and evolution that'll come for that. I would say this, as a Black man in politics, I felt I lost status after Obama became president. So I don't know if they'll experience that dynamic too. But I felt like, there was, the other side of the conversation rose up, I think, a little higher. But how do you see that? Do you see this conversation we're having from elected officials to leaders like yourselves? how do you see that transferring to this conversation around cultural competency? Are we going to get better at being able to address those things, that the dynamics that you talked about, Coach? Are we positioned well to change that in our lifetime, in our generation? Are we positioned well to where this is, we have gotten a hold of the rag and we're rinsing the water out now, and any minute now it's going to be dry. We can see it. Do you think that this environment is right for that kind of change, Coach?
I think it's headed in the right direction, but we need help. As we talked about, your friends calling you, asking you what can they do. We need them to stay in the conversation. They need to check each other continually, their verbiage, how they really think, and embrace what they say and how they say it. See, because we can't do it by ourselves. See, that's why voting is really important in this election. Mm-hmm. See, they can't, because see, we've been on the same for 400 years. See, we need their support. See, otherwise they just teasing us. You're just my friend when I need you. Well, we need you now. We need to get this guy gone, if you know what I mean. We need to say bye-bye, because we need to change the direction that this country is heading right now, because right now, it's kind of like the haves and the have-nots. And why would you go and not at least have a conversation with the person who got shot 7 times in the back? Then make a joke, he choked, and he missed a putt. That don't make no sense, bro. That don't make no sense. Where's your compassion? 7 times? And I don't think he sees the gravity of these little dumb comments that he makes about how hurtful they are to people that look like us. Yeah. That stuff is really hurtful. It means to me that you don't care about how I feel. You don't care about what the effect of your little smart comments. It tells me where your head is and what's on your agenda.
Man, Coach, I mean, I just, you both are really just setting this stage for my next show in a way. I just, because we're going to come to this, because connected to that, Fundy, is this conversation about elections and the census, and what that means. Before we go to that question I'm going to pose, let me just give a few quick shout outs. Jill Patrick Smith is watching, and she says, she didn't ask a question, but she just said, hey, love all of these sessions. Kudos for being innovative and continue these discussions. I will, Jill. I think this is the best part of my job, and that's having a community conversation about how we can get better as a community. Kenneth Brittman Jr., thank you for joining, sir. He also says, education is a way to teach us one to think intensely and critically. Intelligence plus character is good. Much needed conversations. Thank you so much. And then we've got joining us, Shirley Walker Friedman. Thank you so much for joining us. And Bridget Smith is tuning in from Los Angeles, California. I don't know how that happened, but welcome, Bridget, for joining. Thank you. Bridget Smith, let me some other shout outs. Dawn Reynolds. We've got Laquita Moya from Lorain, Ohio. All right, Laquita, thank you so much for joining us. Nationally known artist Ben Crumpler. And so Ben, now wait a minute. Ben Crumpler is watching? Ben Crumpler is watching? Ben, you better call me, because I need to get you on. I need to get you on right now. So you better call, and we better get you on. And so I appreciate you signing in. And then Magistrate Lachelle Stroud is on. So thank you so much once again for joining. Now, we got a question. We're going to talk about the census in a second. But before we do, let me answer Bridget's question in case she's got to go back to work or do something she's supposed to be doing. So we'll come back. We're going to park the census question. So we're going to park it over here. We're going to come back to this question. All right. Bridget asks, should whites educate themselves on the struggle and start reading White Fragility by Dr. Robin DiAngelo? What do you think of that? Do you think white people have a responsibility to educate themselves about this issue? And then we're going to go to the census question. Let's start with you, Fundy.
Listen, this ties into my response around cultural competency. And really what this means is, how do you help folks, particularly in the dominant or in mainstream society, how do you help them build cultural capital? And what I define cultural capital is, it's the goodwill generated by an individual, family, or organization in meeting the needs, fulfilling the expectations within reason, and addressing the concerns of communities of color. That's how you develop cultural capital. Mm-hmm. And it's got to be intentional. It's got to be deliberate. It can't just be a photo op. You got to be in it for the long haul. You got to be invested. I've challenged a lot of companies working with them here in Central Ohio to say, you have to be more culturally competent. Let's look at your staff. Let's look at your board members. Mm-hmm. Are they representative, particularly in financial services and engineering? Disproportionately, hardly any African Americans there. So, and when you see this and you say, well, is this intentional or is it negligent? There's a difference. There's a difference. Is it intentional or negligent? But I think, how do we move forward? We can't really relitigate the past. We can't get people to feel guilty, because then they feel guilty, then they may not operate from a sincere heart, as Coach talked about. So how do we get people to say, listen, this is the right thing to do for the right time and the right reasons? And then we can help all people, because you think about this for a second, we've always gravitated, or I say mainstream society in terms of African Americans. You know, what type of enjoyment can you provide? Athletically, entertainment, whatever. But when are we going to welcome the geniuses, the intellect, the academic? That's why I always took pride in academics, because I never wanted to just be an athlete, right? I never wanted to just be stereotyped. But there are so many of our young people who are geniuses. They're trapped in an environment where they can't flourish. So what can we do to go into these communities, to build cultural capital, to be consistent, to put investment dollars, direct investment, to really support the people who are in these communities, and to empower and to propel their legacies forward, not just their lives. It's got to be a change in legacies, or else it's going to be short-lived. So that's one of the things that I've challenged organizations. You have to build cultural capital. And one way you do that is you have to have a targeted investment with verifiable results in terms of empowering the people who most need it.
Coach?
Well, I've been knowing Lawrence since he's in elementary school. And I'm very happy and very proud to say, you're a friend of mine, man. I really enjoy you. You got to have a plan. And the plan should be, it's got to be inclusion. And as Lawrence said, intentional, right. Hey, I got a plan. Come on, I got something I want to share. Mm-hmm. And, I do a thing when I speak about teamwork. Teamwork makes the dream work. Throughout life, in families, brothers and sisters, mother. I came from a split home. My parents were divorced when I was 27 months old. But my auntie and my uncle helped my mother. Mm-hmm. Right, 3 kids, single parent. Hey, my auntie and my uncle took the 3 of us in because they knew my mother was going to struggle without it. Teamwork. You can't look around like it's not there. And if you have to continually ask yourself, what can I do, without in your heart, in your mind, knowing what you should do, just do it. That's probably the right thing. But see, a lot of times we don't do things because what's our return? And see, that's what's wrong with America. America don't do jack because they want to know what can I get out of it? Yeah, that's another human being right there. Help that butt. Then they got to want to be helped. And then once they see somebody can help them, don't sit around just wait for the handout. Get invested. Right. Get off your butt and do something for yourself, and somebody may help you. But sometimes they don't see how they can do it, so you help show them. You don't keep going down the wrong path. It's going to lead to a dead end. Say you're going the right way. Help somebody out. For no other reason than another human being, and you're in position to help them. Yeah, that's called humanity.
I agree. And, to Bridget's question, I would say I think it is valuable for white people in general to read and learn, not revisionist history, but real history. And a part of the conversation of around healing and growth that you're talking about, Coach, is rooted in facts, rooted in having the information that you need to understand that as a country, the way we started off, we purposely designed a system to oppress a certain people, to oppress what was then former slaves. That was the Jim Crow era, and so, unwinding that is part of unwinding that is understanding how we got here, what led us here, and how we do it in covert ways often that have continued to plague our society and keep Black people down, keep minorities down. And that's really why this conversation is so critical. Let me give a quick shout out to Philip Bridges, Phil Calloway, Sherry Hamilton, and the Ohio Black Expo for watching. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you're enjoying the discussion today. I know I am. Coach, you talked about teamwork and about we talked earlier about the election process and all these different things, and teamwork is really about everybody playing their role as part of a group to accomplish whatever goal we're setting to do. It might be win a championship in your case, it might be just win the game for the day, but as citizens, as residents of this great country, we are a part of a process that comes along every 10 years to count the number of people that live here. Now, here's why that's important to us, and I want to hear from both of you, what you think of this. But every 10 years we take the census. But going back to Coach Cleamons' point, a lot of what we do is based on statistics. The decisions that we make for funding, the decisions that we make where we build housing, where we build companies, where we build recreation parks or different things that you experience as in your life, most of them are based on data and numbers that show where the people live, where the services are, what is needed. And from an election standpoint, here's where it gets real critical. Ohio, which is currently the 7th most populated state in the US, our allocation of congressional representatives is based on the count, the number of people who live in this state. For the last 2 or 3 decades, we have lost seats, congressional seats, because of the amount of people that live in our state. Now, here's the interesting part. Our state has continued to grow in population, but it's not growing at the rate that southern states are growing. And so we're in a battle right now with states like Georgia and North Carolina and other, growing states for those congressional seats. And we stand to lose 1 or maybe 2 seats. And what that means is over $34 billion comes to Ohio as it stands a year based on our population. So guys, can you talk to the public a little bit? Talk from as a successful African-American men that have experienced different levels of whether it's income or what you do in your job and work experience, but just give me some examples. Maybe talk about, do you think the census is a valuable thing to do? And have you filled out your census form? Coach, we'll start with you, Coach, or whichever one wants to go first.
All right, I'll step up. There's a 6th grade.
First, Coach, have you done your census yet?
That's a yes.
Okay, all right, good.
Well, as a 6th grader at Milo Elementary School, I was on the patrol, and part of you,
we're losing a little bit of.
You got a chance to go help take the census. You're not asking. Yeah. So I've been aware of the census since I was a 6th grader.
Okay.
And yes, we've done our census, and I'm aware of the funding that is provided based on population, and never thought nothing of it. I didn't see it being a divisive thing in our country. I just thought it was part of being your civic duty, is how many people lived in your house, household number within, because I knocked on the door, right? I felt I was being used as any type of proxy. I was doing, once again, my civic duty. Mm-hmm. So yes, and I think that we should be acutely aware of where the funding, how we get the funding, what the funding and the money is spent on, and get the count and let them know there's nothing nefarious about it. Shouldn't be a political item.
Not at all.
Which this is something that we need to know, because if it's our tax dollars that work for us, then our dollars should work for us in our communities. That's nothing wrong with that. But I think somewhere along the line, a lot of what we do here in America depends on what side of the track you live on, and that hurts us as minorities in this country, because once again, it's not built for us to succeed. And we have to understand that, right, if it's an uphill battle, let's battle. But let's get the facts straight. And let's put our armor on if we need to, put our battle gear on, and let's go to it.
Man, I like how you told that story of being a young person and understanding that. And that's one of the beauties of our country, that we have a way of indoctrinating our residents at a young age to really value and understand certain things, and just so we don't have it down where we really got it ingrained in everyone. But it's a beautiful story. Before I go to Fundy, I just want to make sure, if you haven't filled out your census, you got 28 days left to do it. We need you to do that. It's easy, it's quick, and you can do it in your own home and convenience. You just go to my2020census.gov. That's my2020census.gov. Or if you don't have the ability to go online, just call 844-330-2020. That's 844-330-2020. We're talking about $34 billion. That's with a B, $1 billion that comes to Ohio to help us with things like Medicaid, Medicare, affordable housing, transportation, and all the things that you can think of. And so I'm really hopeful that you do your part. And as Coach Cleamons said, vote. That's the first part. And then 2, fill out that census form. If it takes you more than 10 minutes, something's wrong. It's very quick and it's very easy. So Fundy,
in the process,
your experience
with the census. So I'm just telling you, in the process, I'm in the process of filling that out.
Okay, so look, if the public, you heard him say it. He said he was going to fill it out. Can you do it today? Fundy, can you commit to doing your census for me today?
You said 10 minutes. So 10 minutes is not a long time.
I know you got to find that 10 minutes, but we need you. We need that count.
Yeah, so, I think with everything that we're talking about is really it's about momentum. And the reason why I say momentum is, I wrote a book called Momentum Power Play. You can learn more about it at momentumpowerplay.com. But when we think about motion, you think about the motion offense. I think about the triangle formula that Coach Clem was in, right? But when you think about motion,
you got Coach Clem smiling on that one.
I know, I see that. Right?
He was like, the motion, you talking my language now.
Yeah. So, when you think about the laws of motion and how we think of momentum only in terms of sports, but not really in terms of life, right? And that, we know who uncovered or discovered the 3 laws of motion. That's Sir Isaac Newton. But the first law says that a body or object at rest or in a state of motion will continue in that state unless acted upon by what? By force. Okay, here's where I'm going in terms of the force. Okay, there's force here. The second law, which most people don't know, is force is equal to the change in momentum over time. The rate of change in momentum is directly proportionate to the amount of force applied. Mm-hmm. And what is momentum? Momentum is just 2 variables, mass times velocity. Mass is the quantity of matter in an object or body. Velocity is the speed or acceleration of a body or object in a given direction. As someone who my first love was actually football, but when you're tall, you're thin, you talk a lot of trash, that's a bad recipe for a football player. Would you gentlemen agree, and ladies as well? Okay. Now, in saying that, right, the thing about it is we think about where we are in the nation's history, right? The worst hit in football is to be blindsided because you never see it coming. But we're at a moment where we're forced to take action, right? And what are we going to do with this moment? Not just African Americans, right? Americans. Coach talked about it. Americans for all. So what are we going to do with this opportunity, right? We can't keep being blindsided by things that take place for us to wake up and say 2020, we need to do something in terms of historical injustices that have happened and been perpetrated against African Americans. That has to change. Lastly, the last factor of momentum is for every action, there is an opposite and equal reaction.
Mm-hmm. So I remember something from science class. I got it.
Go ahead. What momentum are we going to do? What are we going to do with this moment? And if not, we've just basically wasted a critical moment in our nation's history. And I think that's what the danger is, because we got some attention and then companies talked about it, and organizations didn't do a lot about it in terms of the cultural competency or the cultural building cultural capital. Now we gotta make sure that people are invested and they're actually committed to doing something. And again, it has to be holistic. It can't just be sports. It got to be education, business, whatever the case may be. Obviously investing in our community, I think, is the best way to actually move the ball forward and build momentum.
So I should just disclose now that I'm going to use that speech somewhere. You're going to hear me repeat that, and I'm going to give you credit to that, because I love the way you put that. So if you hear me use it, don't say, "Oh man, he just took my stuff." I'm admitting it right now in Franklin County that I'm taking Lawrence Funderburke's comments. I'm going to use them, and I won't present them as my own. I will share the credit to you, but I love that analogy.
You can get the book.
You know what I am. That's what I do. So one of the questions that came in online now. So somebody asked, Commissioner Boyce, ! Your Facebook watchers want to know, did you take the census? Hell yeah, I took the census. Of course I did. I actually chair the census committee. So yes, I did the census. Of course I did. No, I'm being funny, but I did. It's specific. I admit I got my form and it's set on my little mail area for 2 weeks or so before I got to it. But what I did with it was, I remember I put it on my refrigerator so I would see it and I wouldn't forget. And then after about 2 weeks, I got it done. So, but because I want to make sure that I did it. What I should have done, I should have did it in front of everybody online. I should have did it on the show. And then I wouldn't have those questions. And then let me just shout out to Greg Walker and Philip Bridges for joining us. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to us. We got 3 minutes, gentlemen. Close us out with some comments. If you were talking to, let's say, some of our young millennial friends, and these folks are now the largest population. They have overtaken the baby boomers in terms of the largest segment of our population. Hey, let's say you had one of these 20-something or even early 30-somethings come to you and say, just give me one piece of advice about financial literacy that I should take in a very short and simple way. What would you say to them? Let's give them just one, let me start off. I'll say, what I would say to you is, try to maximize your resources so that as you age and as you don't know what your scenario in life will bring. And so maximize your resources by investing, diversifying the things you do in terms of what you're planning for retirement. And I would tell you to get a financial advisor. That's what I would say. But what would you say in a quick nutshell? We got 2 minutes, guys. So you got 30 seconds each. What would you tell somebody?
Yeah, real quickly, what I would say is what's your value proposition? Because your value proposition is going to determine, right, how much money you make, what job you get, what type of lifestyle you lead, and then also what type of lifestyle your children are going to have. So your value proposition is embedded in your personal brand statement. What is your personal brand statement? It's the image that you want portrayed, and also how other people's read, view, or perceive you. Your value proposition is what separates you from other people. And then obviously you got to know the how of the who. How are you going to do it? How are you going to leverage your value proposition in such a way to benefit, not just financially, but also educationally, spiritually, intellectually, all of that. So that's what I would say. Maximize your value proposition and the rest will take care of itself.
Love it. Love it. And you got a book too, right? Tell them what book should they go out and read?
Yeah, MomentumPowerPlay.com. They can learn more if you want to comment or you want to reach me, MomentumPowerPlay.com. That's how you can get in touch with me.
Absolutely. Okay. Coach, what advice would you give a budding millennial today?
Well, a friend of mine told me this story a couple of years ago. He has about three young children, and he was talking about all that he had done for his family. And his kids said to him, "Daddy, we didn't work as hard because we thought that's what you were doing." And it's like he realized then they missed the point. He was working hard for them, and they thought that they didn't have to work hard for themselves. So the children should realize that, mommy and daddy trying to lead the way, but there's a point in time, like any race that we run, we have to pass the baton forward. And young people have to be willing to accept that baton when it comes. That's the purpose. Funny said early on about purpose. You have to have a purpose in life.
Man, you guys have been amazing. And I'm sincerely mean that. This was definitely one of the best discussions. I'm sure I'm going to hear from that from our viewers. But it's 4 o'clock and that ends our time. But before I go, Central Ohio, I just wanted to introduce you to the real brains of my operation, the folks who make this work and who just really represent you at the highest level, but you never see because they're behind the scenes. They do all the work to help me get ready for these shows. And you send these nice notes and I get a ton of Instagram notes and Facebook notes about how well this conversation goes. But these are the folks that really do it for me. I don't deserve the credit. They do. So I want to introduce you to Tamara Howard, Jessica Sullivan, and Gail Saunders, my team that have been just tremendous in helping us put this together. We're going to keep it going. You know, we're going to continue through the end of this month, and then we will go into a podcast because I just think these conversations are meaningful because as we grow, we need as much information, support, and resources we can of people, the voice of the people, to make sure that our conversations are fruitful. So I'll see you this time next week on Wednesday. I'll see you soon. Thanks, Lawrence Funderburke, and thanks, Coach Jim Cleamons, for being with us today. You guys are amazing. I appreciate you both. I'll be in touch and can't wait to have you back sometime. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye, Central Ohio. See you next week.